There's a certain stillness to hospitals at night that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's not just quiet. It's a deep, sterile silence that hums beneath the fluorescent lights, buzzing faintly like a held breath. For Lena McAdams, 32, that silence was more unsettling than the surgery she'd just undergone. She was recovering from a straightforward gallbladder removal at St. Mark's Regional Medical Center, a hospital just outside Canton, Ohio. She had no serious complications, but hospital policy meant she had to stay 2 nights for observation. Her room, room 313, was at the end of the east wing. The halls near her room were always dimly lit and strangely empty, with no other patients nearby. "We like to keep this section quiet for post-op recovery," the nurse had said, with a too-sweet smile. The first night, Lena appreciated the solitude. She scrolled through her phone, watched reruns of sitcoms on mute, and let the sedatives carry her to sleep. But by the second night, the peace felt more like isolation. The shadows in the corners of the room stretched longer than they should. Every creak, every soft thump set her nerves on edge. At 3:02 a.m., Lena was woken by a sound that pulled her out of sleep like a hook. Footsteps. Not the sharp, purposeful steps of a nurse or doctor. These were slow, dragging, uneven, like one foot didn't quite work right. Her heart began to pound. She turned her head toward the door. The hallway light glowed faintly underneath it, casting a soft yellow line across the floor. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside her door. She waited, breath held. No knock, no beep of a medical scanner, no polite voice calling her name. Then she saw it, a shadow stretching under the door, human in shape, but too still. It didn't shift or fidget like a normal person's shadow would. It just stayed there, unmoving. Lena froze. Her rational mind fought to dismiss it. Medication, light distortion, her imagination. But something deep in her gut, a cold instinct, knew better. The shadow remained for what felt like an eternity, and then, slowly, it receded, melting back into the hallway. The next morning, sunlight warmed the sterile tiles of her room, and Lena tried to laugh it off. Dream, delirium, something. When Nurse Tanya came in with her chart, Lena casually mentioned the incident. "I think I saw someone outside my room last night. Around 3? Kind of freaked me out." Tanya's expression faltered. Barely. A twitch in her cheek, a flicker in her eyes. Then came the forced smile. "Oh, maybe it was one of the interns. They do late-night checks sometimes." It didn't sound like anyone was walking normally. Like, it dragged 1 foot. "Could have been a patient," she said quickly. "Nothing to worry about." But Lena could feel the shift. The way Tanya avoided eye contact. The way she hurried through the rest of the checkup. Something about the story had made her uncomfortable. Later that day, Lena overheard the man in the room diagonally across the hall, Mr. Harlan, speaking with a nurse. He was older, maybe late 70s, and had been recovering from a heart procedure. She couldn't catch the whole conversation, but one phrase came through loud and clear. "The shadow in the hallway." Lena's blood ran cold. After the nurse left, she waited until she heard movement and called across the hall. "Mr. Harlan, what did you say about the hallway?" He paused, then shuffled to the door. His eyes were pale and tired, but alert. "You saw it too?" Lena nodded slowly. "It comes at 3, he said. "Always 3. Just stands there, like it's watching." waiting. Her heart hammered in her chest. "What is it?" Mr. Harlan just shook his head. "I don't know, but someone dies every time it shows up." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She left her lamp on, pulled the blankets up, watched the crack beneath the door. 3:00 a.m. The lights in her room flickered once, just for a second. Then came the sound. Step, drag, closer. She clenched the sheets in her fists, unable to move. Her eyes were locked on the door. The shadow appeared again, taller this time, more defined. Then, it did something different. It didn't stay outside. It moved, slowly and fluidly, down the hall, past her door, toward Mr. Harlan's room. Then, it disappeared. Not around the corner, not out of view. It went through his door. At dawn, Lena heard the crash of a cart being rushed past her door. A nurse calling for a doctor. An overhead announcement. Code blue in room 315. Mr. Harlan was gone. They said he passed peacefully, that his heart simply gave out. But Lena knew better. She heard two nurses whispering near the break room later that day. She didn't mean to listen, but she couldn't help it. "It always happens around 3, one said. "Always at the end of the hall," the other replied. "I don't know what it is, but it's not natural." They weren't talking about medicine. They were talking about the shadow. Lena tried to get transferred. She begged to be discharged early, but there were no open rooms. The doctor wanted one more night of observation, so she waited. And as the clock ticked closer to 3, her body tensed with terror. 2:59 a.m. The lights dimmed. 3:00 a.m. The shadow returned. This time, the door to her room creaked open an inch on its own. She could feel it. The presence. Cold and thick like smoke. The shadow stood on the other side of the door, its head cocked to the side as if curious. Then it stepped closer. Slowly. Deliberately. Lena couldn't scream, couldn't even breathe. Then, an alarm blared from the other wing, a flurry of footsteps, voices shouting. The shadow paused, turned, and vanished into the hallway. By morning, she was cleared to go. No explanation, no long goodbye. Just a nurse handing her the discharge papers and walking her briskly to the elevator. As the elevator doors closed, Lena turned for one last look at room 313. And in that moment, just before the doors slid shut, she saw it. The shadow, standing in the hallway, watching, waiting. She never went back. But sometimes, when she wakes up in the middle of the night, always around 3:00 a.m., she swears she hears it again. A dragging step. Then silence. I had worked in hospitals before. As a registered nurse in my late 20s, I'd seen plenty. Suffering, recovery, heartbreak, and hope. But nothing prepared me for Hawthorne Ridge. Hawthorne Ridge Geriatric Center was a facility about 30 minutes from my apartment in western Pennsylvania. It was quiet, tucked between long stretches of trees and foggy roads that felt like they belonged in a horror movie. I only worked there for a few weeks, and by the time this story takes place, I was already thinking about moving on. That particular night, what became my second to last shift, sealed the deal. It was the graveyard shift, the kind that leaves your body aching and your mind unraveling from lack of sleep. I was assigned to the Alzheimer's and dementia ward, a place where time seems to lose its meaning. The patients often existed in memories or moments long gone. And for a few of them, those memories were terrifying. That night, I was responsible for 6 patients, most of whom were already tucked in and asleep by 11 p.m., except for one. Her name was Martha. Martha had only recently been transferred into the ward. In her 80s, with wild gray hair and watery blue eyes, she carried a weight behind her gaze that felt off. Every time I stepped into her room, she'd whisper, "He's watching me again." When I asked who, she'd turn her head slightly toward the dark corner by the window and mutter, "The man in the black suit." He never stopped smiling. Her roommate, a quiet woman named Ellen, had asked for the curtain between their beds to be kept closed. "Martha talks too much," she'd said earlier in the evening, with a soft smile, the kind that's trying to hide discomfort. At first, I chalked it all up to Martha's condition. It's common in dementia patients to hallucinate or relive traumatic memories. I did my best to reassure her. I knelt beside her bed, held her hand, and told her she was safe, that I was there, that no one was watching her. And for a while it worked. Her eyes fluttered shut, and I left the room hoping it would be a calm night. Around 1:45 a.m., I was alone in the linen room, restocking supplies. The ward was unusually silent, not just quiet, dead silent. I had closed the door behind me, trying not to disturb anyone. As I placed folded sheets onto the cart, I heard it. A noise, a subtle shifting sound, like someone adjusting their weight on an old floorboard. But the linen room had no floorboards, just tile. I paused. "Maybe it's the HVAC," I whispered to myself, though I didn't believe it. I went back to my task. That's when I felt it. A hand. Large, cold, pressing down firmly on my left shoulder. I spun around with a jolt, my heart leaping into my throat. No one was there. I stumbled backward, breath catching, eyes darting around the room. I could still feel the phantom pressure of fingers digging into my shoulder. My skin crawled. Opening the door to the hallway, I peeked out. Empty. Not a nurse in sight, not a single sound. Chalk it up to exhaustion, I thought. Just finish up and move on. But when I turned around to push my cart out, I froze. Standing outside the linen room door, just beyond the small glass window, was a man. Tall, thin, wearing a pitch-black suit and hat that shadowed most of his face, but not the smile. That smile, wide, hollow, unmoving. It stretched across his face like it had been carved there. His eyes didn't blink. They just stared at me, locked in on my fear. I screamed. I collapsed to the floor, knocking over the cart as the scream ripped from my throat, sharp and panicked. I barely heard the supplies clattering to the ground. I couldn't stop staring at that damn window. But in a blink, he was gone. A fellow nurse, Jamie, rushed in. She found me on the floor, hyperventilating, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He was just here, right outside the door. "Did you see him?" I begged. Jamie's face twisted in confusion. "Who?" "The man in black." He was smiling, standing right there. "Please tell me you saw him." She shook her head. "There's no one else in this ward, Sarah. I swear." "Let's check the rooms." Room by room, we searched. Nothing. No visitors. No unauthorized personnel. No cameras in that hallway either. Just emptiness. But when we reached Martha's room, we weren't prepared for what came next. Martha was sitting upright in bed, her eyes wild, scanning the room like she was trapped in a nightmare. "He's here," she said, voice trembling. "He's walking the halls again. I heard someone screaming. He's coming." She didn't know the scream had been mine. I slowly approached her bed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Martha, that man you keep seeing, does he smile?" Her face changed. For a brief moment, the fog of her dementia seemed to clear. Her eyes locked onto mine, and then she asked, slowly, deliberately, "How did you know he was smiling?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The air felt like it had been sucked from the room. Martha suddenly screamed and tried to get out of bed. "Get me out of here! He's coming for me! Don't let him take me!" Jamie and another nurse rushed in to calm her. I stepped back, shaking, overwhelmed by dread. I was pulled from the ward for the rest of the night and assigned to a quieter floor. I didn't argue. I went home early and barely slept. I kept seeing that smile, the eyes, the way he disappeared like smoke. The next day, I texted the head nurse and told her that my next shift would be my last. Her reply was understanding, but brief. To this day, I've never been diagnosed with sleep paralysis or hallucinations. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I've worked dozens of night shifts before, but that night was different. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe Martha's fear infected me somehow. But that man, the one I saw with my own eyes, the one Martha had described before I said a word, he was real, or he felt real. And if he was real, I hope to God he stays in that corner, far away from me, forever. Three years ago, I was living in a quiet suburb just outside Tampa, Florida, with my husband, Derek. Life was normal, maybe even a little too quiet. Then, without warning, everything changed. It started with a blinding headache, the kind that makes your vision pulse with every heartbeat. I chalked it up to stress, but then came the nausea, the fogginess, the inability to stay awake for more than a few minutes at a time. My appetite disappeared. I couldn't think straight. I barely remember how it all escalated. But what I do remember, the part I'll never forget, were the voices. It was a weekday afternoon. Derek was at work and I was home alone, curled up in bed, sweating and shaking under a mountain of blankets. I remember the house was silent, eerily so. Then I heard it. A child's voice, soft and distant, called out from downstairs. "Mom?" My heart dropped. Derek and I don't have kids. We've never had children, and no one was visiting us. At first, I thought I imagined it. Maybe the fever was messing with my mind. But then I heard it again. "Mom?" This time it was clearer, closer. I sat up, dizzy and disoriented, and dragged myself out of bed. I stumbled toward the stairwell, gritting my teeth through the pain in my skull, and called out Derek's name, hoping, praying he'd somehow come home early. No answer, just silence. The pounding in my head became unbearable, so I crawled back to bed, too weak to care if it was a hallucination or something worse. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. I tried to sleep, but my body wouldn't let me. Then another voice, not a child's this time, spoke from just outside the bathroom door while I was vomiting. I couldn't make out what it said. I don't even know if it was male or female, but it was definitely inside the house. By now, I was fully panicking, hands trembling. I called Derek. I could barely get the words out through my tears and nausea, but he knew something was very wrong. He told me to hang tight. He was coming home immediately. By the time Derek got me to the ER, I could barely hold my head up. The fluorescent lights burned my eyes, and every sound felt like it was slicing through my skull. The diagnosis came fast: bacterial meningitis. The doctor explained how serious it was, possibly fatal if left untreated. He looked at me like I was lucky to have made it in when I did. I was immediately hooked up to an IV and pumped full of antibiotics. They told me I'd need to stay for at least a few days, maybe a week, depending on how my body responded. Derek stayed until late that night, holding my hand and brushing my hair out of my sweaty face. I could tell he was scared. I was too. Around 10 p.m., he left reluctantly. He had to be up early for work, and I urged him to get some rest. As the nurse tucked me in and dimmed the lights, I remember whispering, "Please check on me during the night." She gave a soft smile and nodded. Sleep hit me like a drug, but what followed wasn't rest. It was something else entirely. I dreamt that someone was in the room, standing over me, talking. It was my ex-husband, Jake. I hadn't seen or spoken to Jake in over 6 years. Our marriage had ended in flames. Abusive, toxic, and full of dark memories I tried to bury deep. In the dream, Jake leaned close to me, whispering awful things about Derek. He patted my head and said he was glad I was okay. Then his voice dropped. I came as soon as I saw Derek leave. I hate him. I want to kill him. He said it with such calm, such certainty, that I physically recoiled, even in sleep. He rubbed my forehead one last time and walked out of the room. I woke up with my heart racing and my skin cold. The dream had been so vivid, I could still smell his cologne, that same overpowering musk he always wore. But something wasn't right. There was a chair pulled up directly next to my bed. It hadn't been there when Derek left. I remembered clearly. It had been tucked under the window on the other side of the room. I stared at it for what felt like an hour. Then, eventually, I drifted back to sleep. Revelation in the morning. The nurse came in the next morning to check my vitals. I told her about the disturbing dream, how real it felt, how the chair had moved. She stopped what she was doing and looked at me with sudden seriousness. "That wasn't a dream," she said. "Your cousin, David, I think, visited you late last night." My blood ran cold. I don't have any cousins named David," I said slowly. "And I don't have any family in Florida." Her eyes narrowed. "Well, that's what he told us. He signed in under that name. He said he was your cousin and just wanted to check on you. David was Jake's middle name." Later, a doctor came in to speak with me. I told him everything. He explained that antibiotics can cause delirium in some cases, especially in patients already dealing with neurological infections. He said it was possible I couldn't tell the difference between dream and reality, especially in that state. But then, how did the nurse know his name? How did the chair move? That afternoon, I texted Jake. I told him I knew what he said. I demanded to know how he found out I was in the hospital and warned him to stay away from my husband, or I'd go to the police. He replied, "I didn't say anything like that. I just came to check on you. You must have imagined the rest." I blocked his number. I never told Derek what Jake said in the hospital room. I didn't know if it was real or just some fever-induced nightmare. Maybe both. The doctor said it could go either way. But here's what I do know. The child's voice, the phantom footsteps, the shadow outside the bathroom, the chair, the dream. It all felt too real to be imagined. And to this day, sometimes, when the house gets quiet, I still think I hear that voice again. "Mom." And I know it's not just the illness anymore. Working the night shift at a hospital might sound quiet and easy to some, but those people have never walked the halls of St. Emery's Medical Center after midnight. When the lights dim just a little too much, when the silence turns thick, and when the basement starts to breathe. My name is Marcus Hale, and I took the job as a security guard thinking it would be nothing more than easy money. No crowds, no chaos, just routine patrols, and maybe catching a teenager sneaking into the emergency wing. But I quickly learned that the night doesn't sleep in hospitals. It waits. And the basement, that's where it watches. The first few weeks were fine. Quiet, even dull. Nurses moved like ghosts in the halls, and doctors kept their heads down, buried in charts and fatigue. I had a route. Check the entry points, make sure the pharmacy was locked, and do rounds through each floor every couple of hours. But there was one place I hated going, level B2. That's where the morgue sat. It wasn't just the obvious creep factor. It was the way the elevator seemed to shudder when descending there, or the moment the doors opened and you were hit with a chill that felt like it came from inside your own bones. That level didn't feel abandoned. It felt occupied, but by something unseen. One night, about halfway through my shift, I was assigned a full sweep of the basement after a maintenance worker claimed to hear voices down there. Probably pipes or some bad wiring, the day shift supervisor had said. But even he wouldn't go with me. It was 12:47 a.m. when I stepped off the elevator onto B2. The digital panel blinked once, then went black. The lights flickered overhead, just slightly, not enough to trigger panic, but enough to raise the hairs on the back of my neck. The air felt still, too still, like the floor had been vacuum sealed off from the rest of the building. I checked the storage rooms first, locked and quiet. Then the electrical panel, nothing unusual. Finally, I reached the morgue doors. Heavy, steel, unmistakable. I'd passed them dozens of times before, but that night, I paused. Something in me hesitated, an instinct, ancient and primal, whispering, "Don't go in." And then I heard it. A sound. Faint. Almost non-existent. Marcus. My spine stiffened. I froze. I looked around. No one in the corridor. My breath clouded in the air. Marcus, please. I backed away from the morgue door, my pulse thudding in my ears. I wasn't crazy, I heard it. A voice, thin and trembling, whispering my name like it had lived inside my memory all along. I turned on my flashlight, its beam slicing through the dim hallway, sweeping from wall to wall. Empty. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the mind, maybe stress. But then something tapped. Soft. Repetitive. Tap. 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 I followed the sound to one of the morgue drawers, the one marked unclaimed, 03. I didn't want to open it. God, I didn't want to. But the tapping didn't stop. It was like a metronome counting down something terrible, and I couldn't ignore it. I gripped the drawer handle, sweat beading down my temple, and pulled. Just a clean steel slab. No body bag. No evidence anyone had been there. But the air inside was colder than ice. I leaned in, and that's when I felt it. Breath. On my neck. I snapped back and swung the flashlight behind me. Nothing. But I swear I heard something move. Bare feet, dragging across the tile behind me. I backed away, my chest tight, lungs refusing to pull in air. I knew I should leave, but something in that silence held me still, like I was being watched, studied. Then I noticed something I hadn't before, a handprint. On the inside of the freezer drawer's door, small, pale, like someone had pushed against it from the inside. I ran. I didn't care about protocol, didn't bother to finish my round. I just got in the elevator, slammed the button for the ground floor, and didn't breathe until those doors opened and I was surrounded by the soft, humming lights of the lobby. I reported the experience to my supervisor, but he just offered a tired chuckle. "Morgue stories always get to the new guys," he said. "You'll get used to it." But I didn't. Not after I started seeing her. It started a week later. I was doing rounds on the first floor, near the surgical recovery wing. Lights were dimmed low, patients asleep. That's when I saw a figure at the end of the hall, small, wearing a hospital gown, barefoot. She turned the corner and disappeared. I chased after her, radio in hand, calling for assistance. But when I got there, no one. Later that night, I reviewed the security camera footage. Hallway empty. But right before I turned the corner on screen, a flicker, a blur, a small shadow. Too fast to make out, but it was there. Exactly 12:47 a.m. The same time I heard my name outside the morgue, I stopped talking about it. Thought maybe I was losing it. But then other guards started mentioning odd things. I could swear I heard someone crying in the basement last night. The elevator went to B2 on its own. No one was in it. I thought I saw a little girl standing in the staff lounge, but she vanished. No one wanted to admit it, but we were all feeling the same thing. Something was wrong down there. And every time someone saw the girl or heard the voice, 12:47 a.m. Months passed. I learned to avoid B2. I traded shifts, took extra patrols on the upper levels just to stay away from that corridor. But sometimes, you don't get a choice. That night, we were short-staffed. An alarm went off in the basement. False trigger, probably. But policy said it had to be checked, and I was the only one left. It was exactly 12:42 a.m. when I stepped on the elevator. As it descended, I gripped my flashlight like a weapon, my mouth dry, my stomach tight. The doors opened at 12:47. The hallway was silent. Still. My boots echoed too loudly. And then I saw her, at the far end, head bowed, hair covering her face. She raised her hand and pointed to the morgue. I stepped forward, each footfall feeling heavier than the last. My body screamed to run, but my legs betrayed me. The morgue doors creaked open. Inside, empty. But I heard the tapping again. Soft, steady, coming from inside a drawer. And then a voice just behind me. "She's still in there." I turned, but no one stood there. Just cold air and silence. I backed away, the flashlight beam trembling as I raised it, and caught a glimpse in the corner mirror. The girl, standing behind me, eyes black, mouth open. But no scream, just silence. I didn't finish the shift. I walked out, turned in my badge the next morning, and never went back. But the thing is, I still dream about it. About the hallway, the tapping, the voice, the way she pointed, like she wanted to be found, but never left. I later learned that years ago a fire broke out in the pediatric wing during renovations. One child never made it out. Her body was never recovered, only her bracelet. The fire? It happened at 12:47 a.m. No one talks about it now, but I know. She's still down there, still trapped, still waiting. And if you ever find yourself walking alone past the morgue at St. Emery's, don't stop. Don't listen. And if you hear someone whisper your name, run.